Comair's business rescue practitioners have lodged a court application to convert the business rescue proceedings into liquidation proceedings. And they say that despite their best efforts, the BRPs have been unable to secure capital funding required for the airline to continue operating. So for more on the story, we joined on the line via Zoom by Phuthego Mojapele, who's an aviation analyst, as well as Phakamile Hlubi, spokesperson for the National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa. Phuthego, Phakamile, thanks so much to both of you for joining us. But before we get into the interview, let us just hear from the business rescue practitioner, Richard Ferguson.
For the company, its employees, its customers, and South African aviation. We have done our utmost to secure the funding that was necessary, but when we were unable to do so, we had no option but to lodge the application. It's obviously an extremely sad day for the company, its employees, its customers, and South African aviation. We have done our utmost to secure the funding that...
So that was Richard Ferguson, business rescue practitioner, and we did try to get the business rescue practitioners to join us in this conversation. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in that regard. But Phuthego, let me start with you. Are you at all surprised at the latest developments with Comair being liquidated? We know that they've been in business rescue for about 2 years now, but is this something that we saw coming?
Yeah, the writing was on the wall, Sakina. Comair have tried to stay flying, but it was not feasible under the conditions of the COVID, and also having a management that was out of touch with the reality of the situation within the industry. And the writing was on the wall.
So before we even get into the details of that, the business rescue practitioners, rather silent apart from the press releases that they send out. But when we think of business rescue processes and the ultimate outcomes, especially as it's related to the aviation industry over the last while, have they been successful in any circumstance?
Yeah, there are businesses that sometimes get, succeed out of the business rescue. I mean, when you look at, for example, SAA successfully went out of business rescue, but the strategy in which they have applied at the time was a little bit different from Comair. Comair had no strategy as to how they want to get out of the business rescue. For example, they should have went leaner in terms of the operation, and also cut on other services that they have, but not compromising the quality and the standard that you stand for. And part of the reasons why it brought them to where they are, it was because they never had a proper plan in place, but only to go out there to try and secure funding, which was not feasible for the kind of market conditions we have at the moment in the world.
So, Phakamile, if I could come to you with regard to the business rescue practitioners, what's your reaction to the stance that they've taken, and also just the fact that, we never seem to be able to get them on a platform like this to also speak to us about what they are meant to do and how these things are going?
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers. Thank you for having me on the show, and also, of course, to you as well, Phuthego. From Numsa's perspective, we do not believe at all that the business rescue practitioners tried their best efforts, as Richard Ferguson claims in that soundbite, where they did their utmost, quote unquote, to save the airline. The sense that we got from our engagements with the CEO, Glenn Osmond, and the business rescue practitioner is that we seemed to want this airline to be saved more than they do. I think it's also important that people must know that under the leadership of Richard Ferguson, there's been absolutely no transparency about the true state of the financial situation that this company was facing. We were receiving regular feedbacks. I think we were getting feedbacks every month or every couple of months or so. And none of the feedback that they gave us came even close to reflecting the crisis that we now find ourselves dealing with today. Our members are shocked. Our members are devastated, our members are angry, and have absolutely every right to feel that way. Because whilst they did absolutely everything in their power to turn this airline around, they were even subjected to massive salary cuts and benefits cuts. All of that was in vain, because in the hands of this pair, there was no strategy. And that was very clear in the way that they ran this airline. They literally ran it to the ground.
So, Phakamile, you say your members were shocked at the ultimate position that Comair finds itself in right now. Phuthego says that the writing was on the wall. So, what is it that your members were exactly shocked about at this stage?
Shocked because we were getting updates, but these updates in no way reflected the depth of the financial crisis that we are now dealing with now. And even when we engaged the management this week, we engaged them on Tuesday. We actually engaged the business rescue practitioner properly for the first time on Tuesday on the issue of since the grounding, since the grounding, that was the first time we had a proper engagement with him. And he was not transparent or forthright about, for example, when we said to them, how much money do you need in order to make this airline viable? They wouldn't say. They would not disclose. They said that information is only for potential investors. It was very clear that they had no vision to turn the entity around. They refused to disclose who are the investors that they're talking to, what are the terms, what is it that they're looking for. They wouldn't bring us into that conversation at all. So it is our view that they are the ones who brought this airline to the point where it is. Let's not forget that in March, Comair was grounded because of safety issues, because again, under the very same leadership, there was a lot of cutting of corners, which resulted in the operating certificate being suspended by the Civil Aviation Authority. All of this is a reflection of mismanagement by the BRP, particularly because you've got a business rescue process that's been in place for more than 2 years.
So, Phuthego, if we look at the management of Comair, were they competent to run this entity?
No, I will say it loud that they were not. I think when Ronel left the company, Comair and the management, or actually the board, went and get the rogue character to come and save this airline. I mean, you have somebody who has a couple of airlines in his hands. I mean, we know one time what happened to one time and Skywise. And there's the man that you want to bring on board to come and try and save the airline of 72 plus years that is in operation. And you want him to come and run this airline. And he's detaching himself from the reality that he does not have what it takes to run this entity and plunging it to where it is today. And I just think that the biggest mistake that they have made here was to bring this man on board, because Comair, for the past years, it has been, very profitable. I mean, you could not even think that it would end up to where it is today, because the manner in which they had run it during the time of Eric Fenter and many others that were there. We know the success of Comair. But under Glenn, I think that was the biggest mistake that they took. He flouted almost everything, including the safety, that we have seen CAE flagging on Comair. And that was as a result of bad management that came out of Comair. So today we are sitting with pilots, and my heart goes out to those aviators that are now going out on the streets that are not going to be having an employment, because we cannot have people that are genuinely have interest in securing the business. And here we are today, one of the top airlines that we have always been proud of, it's going down.
So even against that depressing financial backdrop, you still have business rescue practitioners who since 2020 have been paid R1 million or more per month. Where was the logic in that, given that the process has taken this long and has delivered effectively nothing?
No logic.
Please go for it, Phakamile, and then Phuthego, you can also take a shot at that.
Apologies. No logic whatsoever, because as Phuthego so clearly put it, look at the history that this airline has had. Look at the management that has been there before. And to find ourselves here, I mean, Glenn Osmond does not have the kind of experience that is required to run an airline of this kind. The airlines that he was dealing with before, Lyft and not Lyft, but the other one, I just forgot the name. Those airlines collapsed under his watch. Now we're watching Comair collapse. These business rescue practitioners during their tenure applied and received an approval for their fees to be doubled during this 2-year period. So what we've actually seen is a looting of this business by the business rescue practitioner and total mismanagement of the airline to the point where it is now not operating.
Phuthego?
Yeah, I mean, just to add on what Phakamile is saying, the usual business process, rescue process should not last for more than 6 months. Now, what we see here, it went beyond 6 months. And during that time of 6 months or 12 months or whatever, 24 months that they had, they've been pocketing over R1 million every single month when the airline needed so much money to be able to fly. Why would you keep people for such a long time trying to rescue the business? Because their role is very limited to creating liquidity for the company and making sure that they secure the company, not to lead to liquidation that it's now facing. Why did we have them in the first place? I think that's the biggest problem where it comes from. And the unions were very much vocal, by the way, and not only Numsa, but even other units that says, but we don't think that the management has what it takes. And they ignored that red flags that were there. That at least let's listen to them and look at what is it that we can do to assist and make sure that the company continue to flourish as it should be. And this is really a sad story that we're discussing this morning. I just don't think that I was expecting to be sitting here talking about Comair being liquidated.
Now, Phakamile, why wasn't Glenn Osmond asked to resign? Why did the shareholders not insist on that, given how badly things were going? As we said, even after the first 6 months of business rescue, why did they continue on this trajectory?
Well, I think we have a real problem of management at Comair at the moment. It's literally Glenn Osmond and the business rescue practitioners who are in charge. There's no accountability. They are answering and are answerable only to themselves. There's no actual board, so to speak, dealing with these issues. And this is really the heart of the problem here. And I mean, they don't account to anyone. You asked earlier that you often struggle as media houses to get them on your platforms to do interviews. That's exactly how these people have been operating for more than 2 years. They refuse to account for any decisions that they take. They don't respect labor and stakeholders and these processes of engagement. For example, on the 31st of May, when they made the announcement to ground the airline, literally hours before that decision was made, they were selling tickets at discounted rates. Now, there are very serious questions that we must ask, ethical questions that we must ask about how can you wake up, make a decision to sell tickets at the rate that they were selling them on that day, and then only hours later break the public's trust, ground those flights, leave thousands of passengers stranded, leave workers shocked and having to deal with angry passengers on the ground. This has been a hallmark of the leadership under Glenn Osmond, the CEO, and Richard Ferguson, the business rescue practitioner. They just don't care.
So, Phakamile, in terms of recourse, I mean, where do you go? Who do you take this to? Or, you know, is it just something that will now just evaporate into thin air?
Well, if you're asking for on the question of recourse on our side, at this stage, we are just trying to deal with the shocking news of the liquidation. We met with our members yesterday to try and explain to them what this means and the processes that are to be followed. So we know next week on the 14th of June, there's going to be a hearing regarding provisional liquidation of Comair. But in terms of recourse, we're still having those discussions, certainly with our attorneys, about whether we have any recourse, certainly in the manner in which this airline was deliberately destroyed, in our view. But for now, our focus really is to try and cushion workers as much as possible. We're talking about 1,200 families that are going to be devastated as a result of these news.
So, Phuthego, just to bring everybody else on board in terms of the liquidation processes now, what is going to unfold, how, and how is it going to affect the workers especially?
Okay, this is how the liquidation process is going to follow. So they are going to have to appoint a liquidator who's going to do evaluation of the assets of Comair, meaning that whatever that they own outrightly, the slots, the aircrafts, the simulators, and whatever that they have, it's going to be assessed and evaluated. The value is going to be put on that. After that, then they would go to all the creditors that they have. And from there, then it's going to be whatever that they're going to get out of that is going to be going towards the creditors. As to the employees that have been working for Comair, the regulations is very clear. They will not be able to get what they deserve out of that. The priority is going to go to those creditors, but more importantly, the investors that have put money into that. And I'm really, my heart goes out to those employees that have worked for so many years and are working out of that company with barely nothing. And that's what the process means once you get liquidated. But again, with regard to the recourse, I think, let me just state here, Phakamile spoke about the 30% winter warmer special that they have run. This rogue people that went out of their own way to rob our people, they need to be charged criminally for what they have done. And I think for us to leave them going on like that and not doing anything, we need to charge them, because people are not going to get their money for those tickets that they sold. They will not get their money, especially when they have already applied to court to liquidate the company. The rules is very clear that once that process is ongoing, there's nobody who can come and claim, except the fact that you can go to the liquidator and put your claims to that liquidator. But whatever that is going to be coming out of that, it might not be exactly what you have spent. You might get even 2 rand for that matter. So they need to go to court and charge these people criminally.
And that is such a hard pill to swallow, not only for the employees, but also for those customers who actually went and bought those tickets. But Phakamile, as we wrap this up, do you believe that they tried hard enough to actually find, funding to rescue this particular entity?
We're not convinced that they did. Not at all, Sakina. And that came across, in our view, quite strongly, even in our engagements with them on Tuesday. We did not feel like they were fighting to save this airline. We got the sense that they'd already given up. And
Phuthego, from your side, do you believe that they tried hard enough, especially given the lack of transparency around the process?
I don't think they tried hard. I doubt. Comair is a very simple and easy company to have been saved. Even if you don't go out of the borders to try and secure funding from there, you could still save that company. I just don't think that they did everything within their powers. There should have been more engagement. And I think they should have not delisted the company out of stock exchange. It was, the issue of transparency and accountability, when you don't have people to account to, that's when you led to where we are today, because these people, they literally did not account to anybody, because literally there was nobody there for them to account to. And that's where the biggest problem came from. So Comair was really an easy company to be saved, and I think they should have done much more than what they could have done to save the company.
Final word, Phakamile?
Well, I think right now the focus should be on workers because workers really are the ones who are going to be the hardest hit. They're the ones who are going to suffer the most. And I think what we've learned from the Comair example is that this narrative that is perpetuated consistently in the media, that the private sector is more efficient and can manage companies better, is not necessarily true. Comair is a perfect example of that. You had these two, the business rescue practitioner, Richard Ferguson, and Glenn Osmond, who actively destroyed this airline through mismanagement. And I think we must learn lessons about this, and certainly lessons about accountability, and take more seriously the role that trade unions play in organizations, certainly in trying to raise the alarm and hold executives accountable for how they run entities.
Well, thank you so much, a spokesperson of Numsa, Phakamile Hlubi-Majola, as well as Phuthego Mojapele, who's an aviation analyst, for talking us through the latest developments around Comair that will now go into liquidation. And of course, the offer still stands to the business rescue practitioners or the management of Comair to take us up and give us their side of the story.